Hey, everyone. It's late here, probably too late to be doing this, but I had to get this out. My heart's been doing this weird fluttery thing all day, like a trapped bird, and I figured, maybe if I tell you what happened, it'll finally settle down. I never thought my life would be one of those stories, the kind you scroll past on your feed and think, wow, that's rough. But here I am. It started like the best love story you could imagine. Seriously. I met Liam at a small coffee shop downtown, the one with the mismatched chairs and the smell of roasted beans that just clung to everything. I was buried in a book, nursing a lukewarm latte, and he just appeared. Mind if I borrow that sugar packet? He'd asked, with a crooked smile that instantly disarmed me. His eyes were the color of warm honey, and he had this easygoing charm that made even the most mundane conversations feel electric. We talked for hours that first day about everything and nothing, our favorite movies, our worst travel disasters, the ridiculousness of dating apps. I left feeling lighter than I had in years, like a little bit of sunshine had finally broken through the clouds. Before Liam, my love life had been a series of awkward first dates and fizzled-out potentials. I was starting to think I was just destined to be the quirky, single aunt who collected cats and spoke to plants. But Liam, he was different. He was attentive, he really listened to what I had to say. He remembered the little things, how I liked my coffee, that I hated cilantro, the name of my childhood pet hamster. He'd leave me little notes on my pillow before work, just a quick thinking of you or a silly doodle. He'd show up at my office with my favorite pastries on a tough day, just because he had a feeling. He made me feel seen, cherished, and absolutely adored. It was like I'd spent my whole life walking through a colorless world, and suddenly, he'd flicked on all the lights. Our relationship bloomed quickly, but it never felt rushed. It felt right. We spent our weekends exploring antique shops, hiking trails, trying every obscure food truck we could find. He loved to cook, and I loved to eat, so our evenings often involved him whipping up some gourmet meal while I chopped vegetables awkwardly, laughing as he gently corrected my technique. We talked about the future, not in a vague, abstract way, but with real excitement. We'd imagine our tiny apartment filled with plants, argue playfully over dog breeds. He was a big dog person. I leaned more towards small, fluffy creatures, and even picked out hypothetical names for our non-existent children. He'd hold my hand and tell me, "You're it, Amelia. You're my forever." And I believed him with every fiber of my being. Looking back, there were whispers, tiny tremors beneath the surface, but I was so swept up in the current of our love, I dismissed them as paranoia or just normal relationship quirks. The first one, I guess, was his phone. It was always with him, always face down, always on silent. He'd never leave it unattended, not even when he went to the bathroom. If it rang, he'd usually glance at the screen, and if it was an unknown number, he'd just let it go to voicemail, or sometimes, he'd step out of the room to answer. I chalked it up to work stuff. He was a freelance graphic designer, and his clients could be demanding, calling at odd hours. He'd sometimes get these intense, hushed conversations, usually ending with him saying something like, "Yeah, I'll handle it," or "Don't worry, it's under control." When I'd ask, he'd just wave it off. "Just client drama. You wouldn't understand." And I didn't push. Why would I? He was so good to me. Then there were the emergencies. He'd occasionally get a call in the middle of our dates, or even late at night, claiming a friend or a family member needed him. He'd apologize profusely, kiss my forehead, and rush off. Sometimes, he'd be gone for hours, sometimes until the next morning. When he returned, he'd be vague about the details. My cousin needed help moving, or a buddy's car broke down, had to go get him. He looked tired, sometimes a little stressed, and I felt bad for him. I'd make him breakfast, offer to rub his shoulders, never once doubting his stories. He was always so earnest, so apologetic, and I loved him for being so dedicated to his loved ones. My friends, bless their hearts, occasionally raised an eyebrow. "He's gone a lot, isn't he?" My best friend Sarah had ventured once, her tone casual, but her eyes sharp. I just laughed it off. "He's just a good friend, always there for people." I was so busy defending him, I didn't even hear the faint alarm bells ringing in my own head. There were also these little inconsistencies. A shirt I hadn't seen him wear in months would suddenly appear, looking freshly laundered, sometimes smelling faintly of a perfume that wasn't mine, a sweet, floral scent. When I commented, he'd say, "Oh, found it at the bottom of the laundry basket, or must have picked it up from the dry cleaner." Harmless, right? I never even considered it. There was also the time I found a small, ornate hair clip under the passenger seat of his car. It was beautiful, with tiny iridescent stones. I picked it up, thinking it was probably something I dropped. "Oh, look what I found," I said, holding it up for him. He glanced at it, and for a split second, I saw a flicker of something in his eyes. Panic? Fear? It vanished as quickly as it appeared. "Huh, never seen that before," he said, shrugging. "Must be from one of my sister's kids. They're always leaving stuff in my car." He took it from me and tossed it into the console. My sister's kids? He didn't have a sister. He had 2 brothers. But I just figured I'd misremembered, or he was talking about a cousin. My mind was a master at rationalizing anything that didn't fit the perfect picture I had painted. Then came the day the proof hit me. And it hit me like a physical blow, knocking the wind out of my lungs and leaving me gasping for air. It was a Tuesday. I remember it vividly because Tuesdays were our designated date night at home. We'd cook, watch a movie, just be together without the pressure of going out. Liam had called me that afternoon, sounding stressed. "Babe, I am so sorry, but I've got this huge deadline that just dropped on me. I'm going to be at the office all night. I'll probably just crash on the couch there." My heart sank, but I understood. "It's okay," I said, trying to sound cheerful. "Just text me when you're done." He promised he would. I spent the evening alone, trying to distract myself with a book, but my mind kept drifting to him, imagining him hunched over his computer, fueled by coffee and sheer determination. Around 9 p.m., I decided to surprise him. He loved my homemade chocolate chip cookies, and I figured a fresh batch, still warm from the oven, would be just the pick-me-up he needed. I packed them in a small container, grabbed my keys, and headed to his office. His office was in a co-working space on the 3rd floor of an old brick building. I knew the code to the main door. The lights were mostly off on his floor, a few scattered beams illuminating the empty desks. I walked down the quiet hallway, my footsteps echoing, until I reached his studio. The light was on. A faint murmur of voices drifted from inside. I smiled, thinking he must be collaborating with a colleague, even though he usually worked alone. I pulled out my key, ready to surprise him, when I heard a woman's laugh. A soft, tinkling laugh that was definitely not a colleague's. My hand froze on the doorknob. My stomach clenched. It was that distinct perfume again, the sweet floral scent that I'd occasionally caught on his clothes. I tried to push down the rising tide of unease. "It's nothing," I told myself. "It's just a client. Or a friend." My heart was pounding now, a frantic drum against my ribs. I heard Liam's voice, low and intimate. "You're incredible, you know that?" he murmured. And then another laugh, closer this time. Every cell in my body screamed at me to turn around, to pretend I'd never come, to maintain the blissful ignorance I'd lived in. But some morbid curiosity, some desperate need for clarity, propelled my hand forward. I pushed the door open, just a crack. What I saw shattered my world into a million irreparable pieces. Liam was not hunched over his computer, working on a deadline. He was standing by his desk, his arms wrapped around a woman I'd never seen before. Her back was to me, but I could see her long, dark hair, and the way her head rested comfortably against his shoulder. He was kissing her forehead, his eyes closed, a soft, tender expression on his face, the same expression he reserved for me. And then he leaned down and kissed her lips, a slow, lingering kiss that left no room for doubt. The cookies slipped from my numb fingers, hitting the floor with a soft thud that sounded deafening in the sudden silence. Both their heads snapped up. His eyes, those warm honey eyes I adored, widened in horror. The woman turned, and I saw her face, beautiful, younger than me, with bright, curious eyes that instantly hardened when they met mine. For a long moment, no one spoke. The air in the room was thick, suffocating. The scent of her perfume, now overpowering, seemed to mock me. Liam's face went from horror to a sickening shade of pallor. He opened his mouth, then closed it, no words coming out. I just stood there, staring, feeling like I was watching a scene from a movie, detached and yet overwhelmingly present. My vision blurred. A wave of nausea washed over me. "Amelia," he finally choked out, his voice barely a whisper. I didn't answer. I couldn't. My throat was suddenly too tight, my lungs refusing to cooperate. I looked at him, truly looked at him, and for the first time, saw the stranger behind the mask. The man who had woven such a beautiful tapestry of lies, thread by careful thread, until it was so intricate, so convincing, that I'd walked blindly into its center. Tears, hot and stinging, began to stream down my face, but I didn't make a sound. I didn't scream, I didn't yell. There was no dramatic confrontation, no angry accusations, just a profound, aching silence. The realization, slow and horrifying, that every client emergency, every late-night phone call, every vague explanation, every misplaced hair clip, every whiff of that sweet perfume, it all clicked into place. He hadn't been working. He had been with her. All this time. Our date nights, our future plans, our shared laughter. All of it was built on a foundation of sand, on his carefully constructed deception. I felt a dizzying sense of vertigo, like the floor was tilting beneath me. My beautiful, perfect relationship was a lie. He was a lie. The man I loved, the man I had trusted implicitly, had been living a double life, carving out a secret existence behind my back. The heartbreak was physical, a sharp, searing pain in my chest. But what followed was a chilling emptiness, a feeling of utter betrayal that resonated deep in my bones. It wasn't just that he had cheated. It was that he had so skillfully, so heartlessly manipulated my trust, my love, my very perception of reality. I don't remember walking out of that office. My legs felt like lead, my body a hollow shell. The world outside felt too bright, too loud. I got into my car and just drove, aimlessly, the image of him with her burned behind my eyelids. I drove until the city lights faded and I was on a dark, winding road. The only sound the hum of the engine and my ragged breaths. I pulled over to the side of the road, shut off the engine, and just sat there in the suffocating darkness. And then the dam broke. The tears that had been silently streaming became racking sobs, deep and guttural, shaking my entire body. I pounded the steering wheel, wishing I could somehow beat the pain out of myself. I screamed into the emptiness of the car, a primal sound of agony and disbelief. Hours passed. I cried until my eyes were swollen shut, and my throat was raw. I cried for the wasted time, for the naive girl I had been, for the future that had just evaporated like smoke. I cried for the sheer audacity of his betrayal, the cruel irony that the emergencies that had pulled him away from me were, in fact, him running to her. The next few weeks were a blur of numb existence. I moved out of our shared apartment, packing my things with mechanical precision, every object a painful reminder of a lie. I answered his frantic calls and texts with a single, clear message. It's over. He tried to explain, to apologize, to beg, but his words were meaningless. They were just more lies, more manipulations. The honey-colored eyes now seemed cold, calculating. The crooked smile, a cruel twist. I lost weight. I couldn't sleep. The simple act of breathing felt like a monumental effort. My friends rallied around me, bringing me food, letting me cry on their shoulders, listening patiently as I replayed every interaction, searching for the signs I'd missed, the clues I'd ignored. And they were there. So many of them. The phone always on silent. The vague explanations. The inconsistencies. The hair clip. The perfume. I had been so blind, so desperate to believe in the fairy tale, that I had actively suppressed every flicker of doubt. I had chosen ignorance over uncomfortable truth. The self-realization was excruciating. It wasn't just about Liam's betrayal. It was about my own complicity in my blindness. Not that I deserved what happened, never that. But I realized how much I had wanted to believe in the perfect love story, how much I had projected my desires onto him, how I had ignored my gut instincts for the sake of a fantasy. I had traded my discernment for comfort, my intuition for a manufactured sense of security. It's been months now. The pain is still there, a dull ache beneath the surface, but it's not the searing wound it once was. I'm starting to breathe again, to see color in the world. The healing is slow, and it's messy. There are good days and bad days. Some mornings, I wake up and for a split second, I forget, and then the memory floods back, fresh and sharp. But then I remind myself, I survived. I walked through the fire, and I'm still standing. I've learned so much about myself through all of this. I've learned the importance of trusting my gut, of listening to those quiet whispers of doubt, even when they're inconvenient. I've learned that true love isn't about perfection. It's about honesty, integrity, and genuine respect. And it certainly isn't about ignoring red flags just because the person makes you feel good. I'm focusing on rebuilding myself, piece by painful piece. I'm going back to things I loved, things I'd put aside for him, painting, hiking, spending more time with my incredible friends. I'm not looking for love right now. I'm looking for me. And I guess that's why I'm telling you all this. It's raw, it's messy, and it's deeply personal. But maybe, just maybe, someone out there needs to hear it. Maybe someone else is ignoring those little whispers, those subtle inconsistencies, because the thought of facing the truth is just too terrifying. If you've ever been through something like this, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. And if this story hit you even a little bit, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on that bell.